Again, good afternoon and good morning to some of you. Welcome to the Collaborative Learning Series, and specifically for today's topic, preventing your client promises from slipping through the cracks. For those of you that have joined us and have not yet dialed your participant code, please do so that we can hear you. We'd love for you to collaborate with us. And without access to the audio, we won't be able to hear you. If you need any assistance with joining the audio, go ahead and use the question pane. I have Peggy Ruby here joining me, who can assist you in getting that set up while I continue through the class. So let's get started. The outline for today is the introduction to the content expert, our expert's process, the objectives, what is a weekly recap meeting, what a weekly recap meeting agenda should look like, some group participation, and the expert's outcome. Okay, are you able to switch the page? Can I just see a show of hands using the raise your hand pane? If you can see the slide with my face as your host and the participant map. Perfect. All right. Thank you so much. So for those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Dawn Rem, and I'm the Director of the Practice Management Department here at Key Management Group. I'd also like to have you introduce yourselves to us. You can see a map here and on the presentation. The red are our existing practice management clients, and the yellow are showing those that are participating in today's presentation, in today's class. So if we could, as a little icebreaker, go around and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit more about you, where you're located in the position that you hold in the practice. Our hopes are that this will build a sense of community, and so you can utilize each other as the best resource. Just as a little housekeeping, I do have the phone lines muted here today, so I'll be opening up each phone line individually as I call your name. And the first one up is Kristen Cully.
Good morning, Kristen? My name's Kristen Cully. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. I am the Client Service Manager and a Paraplanner for an advisor here in Phoenix. And I think, kind of we're a small office, so I do a lot of the client service-based things, and I help to facilitate our weekly meeting here in our office.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. Next up is Kelly Aldrich. Please correct me if I stated your name wrong there, Kelly. I've opened your phone line.
Kelly Albrock. I'm in Fredericksburg, Texas. I'm the financial planning and business processing assistant with 3 office locations in Texas.
Great. Thank you so much. And then I have here Kaylin. Kaylin, I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name. You're fine.
Hi, I'm Kaylin Bouchard. I'm the Client Service Coordinator in Lakeland, Florida.
Thank you, Kaylin. Sunny, Florida. Sharissa.
Yes,
I've opened your phone line.
And I am in the Fredericksburg office along with Kelly, and I am the Client Service Coordinator.
Great. Carla Doss.
That's pretty bad.
Hello, Carla Doss, Lakeland, Florida, Financial Planning Specialist.
Thank you, Carla. You have You have a party going behind you.
It's the usual, guys. Just cheering me on.
Sounds like fun. Carla DeShazer.
Hi, I'm Carla DeShazer. I'm the administrative assistant for Southfield, Michigan. And we also have with us Jennifer Matthews. She's going to be our new administrative assistant for our Troy office.
Hello. Hi, Jennifer. I have your name on the list, but I didn't see you in the participant list, so now I know why. Thanks for joining us. And Megan Mitchell, you're last up.
Megan Mitchell. I'm from Lynchburg, Virginia, and I'm a client service coordinator.
Great. Thank you so much. So next up, I'd like to introduce our content expert. I did have Kristen go first here in her introduction. So Kristen, I'm going to open your phone line back up. Kristen, as you mentioned, is the client service coordinator, specifically for the practice McCrossin & Associates. The structure of their practice are 2 advisors, 1 servicing advisor at this time and 1 planning specialist, and then 6 staff members.
Good morning.
See, it's morning for Kristen, afternoon for me.
Yeah, it is.
So
I was going to say, Don, I didn't know where you wanted me to begin.
Yep. So I'll lead this here, Kristen. We're going to start with Kristen's process, and we have a series of questions that we've already had a chance to ask Kristen. As part of being the content expert, we hold a small interview. I know that I've worked side by side with Kristen through learning how to run or facilitate a weekly recap meeting. So I've picked out a few of the questions that I asked her, and I'm going to have her explain them to you. So though I have her responses up here on the screen, I'm just going to have her go through these 3 questions. So the first one, Kristen, if you could explain to everybody, while having your entire team together during the weekly recap meeting, what are the most important topics to cover with that team?
So I think for us, the most important topic that we usually cover is, like it says there, are client interactions that happen the week before. And what I mean by that is that when we take phone calls from the clients, either requesting money or, questions that they may have about taxes or some of the presentations that we've given, we usually try to make sure we make detailed notes about those meetings because our advisors are not always, privy to those conversations. So we'll review those. Make sure that everyone, understands what happened. We'll also review the notes from the client meetings that are held to make sure that all of the tasks that come out of those meetings are clear and understood and everyone is assigned the appropriate tasks. And just, answer any questions that may come up from what needs to be done or what's already been done.
Great. So going back to the title of this class, preventing things from slipping through the cracks, that's really what's most important, having the entire team together. What is the value you see in facilitating such a meeting?
For us, make sure everyone's informed. I know for our office, we have some people that work some different schedules than other people, and we also have, a lot of us do very separate jobs from the others. So we want to make sure everybody understands who is doing what as far as the tasks go and what's expected. We want to make sure that timelines are, made clear and that those are kept. A lot of times there can be multiple steps to a task, so there may be something that I will do and then reassign to someone else to schedule or to prepare a plan. And we want to make sure that none of those pieces fall through the cracks because at the end of the day, when the next meeting comes up, we don't want to have any parts missing.
You got it. You got it. And I love that you mentioned that everyone has a voice and that they can share what's been useful for them in the past. So Kristen's not as new to the practice as you were. How long have you been with the practice now, Kristen?
A little over a year.
A little over a year. So they're able to share with Kristen the team members that have been there for a long time how you may want to accomplish a task, a specific task, and what's worked best for them in the past.
Yeah, it really does help because in our practice we've had some people that have been here for over 20 years, so it helps to get that information.
Great. That's where they collaborate. And last question here for you is, what does a typical weekly recap meeting look like for you?
So in our office, we do use the calendar for the case prep steps. We make sure that on the calendar, each of our meetings is assigned a certain topic, so that way, we have a certain prep scenario that is assigned to each of those topics. So whether it's a 6-month review or a plan presentation, this way I can make sure that I personally do a lot of the prep, so I can include the right material. We also go over any vacations or staff out of the office that may be coming up, so we can make sure that there's always a backup to cover those things. And we have that full disclosure as to who's taking care of what. We look at our weekly meeting review, and we also go over the CMOT. So in doing that, we can, at that point, address the previous meetings that have come up. We specifically look at the ones that are ready for review instead of anything that may be outstanding, because sometimes notes may not be complete or meetings may not have been held. So we try to look at the ones that were. And then each month in our team meeting, we designate a specific topic to discuss. So we look at the tools and technology that have been reviewed, some of the webinars and things that are made available through Ameriprise. We look at the SPS and SPO low balance cash balance report to make sure that any clients that may be falling below that soon, we come up and address and determine if we need to schedule a meeting. We look at new money that we've received over the last week and make sure that we understand what we're doing with it, whether it's being invested or if it's there for a purpose that's coming up later based on meeting notes. We also review any hot topics that also come from the webinars that Ameriprise provides, so we can stay on top of anything new that's come out. And finally, we review the planning tracker, so we make sure we determine on our financial planning clients who has returned their data review, who's paid their fees, who's ready for presentation, and who's not.
Great, great. So I just wanted to point out and ask you to share with the group here what you do about those CMOT line items, so the client meetings that have not been started or that are in progress. Can you just share when you would cover those line items?
We usually cover those if there's a client that either needs to be rescheduled or did not hold their meeting as planned, so we can determine what the next steps are and that person doesn't fall through the cracks as far as, just missing their group service frequency. So if there are ones that have not been made ready for review based on notes, we do look at those to determine why they weren't made ready for review, if we just didn't receive the meeting notes yet or if the client meeting needs to be rescheduled.
Great. And something that you may also didn't mention here that I'll be showing the rest of the group, what we normally recommend is a preference piece for this practice. I'd also like for Kristen to share with you why that is, so you can see that though we have recommendations, there are other preferences that your practice may choose. When do you cover the tracking tools, Kristen? So how do you prep for those? If you could share them with them, what you're doing prior to that weekly recap meeting?
Sure. So we have a slightly different way that we review our BPTs than some of the other teams, I think. We have decided that prior to our weekly meeting as a group with the advisor, the support staff will review our BPTs and make sure that we understand what they mean. And if anyone has questions, we can usually consult between each other and try and determine what the answer is or who that needs to be assigned to without taking up an extra amount of time in our full team meeting. So we will do that usually about an hour before our team meeting every Monday. We'll go through and review the tasks that were assigned to us from the previous week and make sure that if we have any questions that we can't answer, we will assign them to be reviewed during the meeting.
Great. Could you share with the group about how many client meetings we're talking about here on a weekly basis?
Sure. So the advisor that we have that meets with the clients most, I can average anywhere between 10 and 20 appointments a week. So with that, we have the tasks and the meeting notes that come out of each of those appointments that we review.
So, yep. And so With that being said, I know during some of those heavier weeks when they have those 20 client meetings, the 50 minutes or hour-long weekly recap meeting has not been enough, and so they prefer not to keep the advisor involved in all of the discussion prior to the weekly recap meeting, so they're able to discuss those tracking tools, and it makes the process more efficient and effective for that advisor. Less time for the servicing advisor to have to spend discussing the topics that can be discussed with the staff. Great. Thank you, Kristen. I'll be pulling you back in here. I have a couple of questions for you throughout as we go through our best practice recommendations. So I'll be just muting your phone line here for a couple of minutes. So what's our objective today? How can we prevent these client promises from slipping through the cracks? So why should we facilitate a weekly recap meeting? Ensuring that these client promises don't slip through the cracks is best discussed in a formal setting. This is what we call the weekly recap meeting, or WRM, or WRM, as some refer to it. All these promises made to the clients are met completely and in a timely fashion. To ensure that the team is on the same page, as you heard Kristen mention, about the status of operations and the follow-up work, and to provide a forum to get answers to issues that may be holding the team back from the completion of the follow-up. Again, you heard Kristen mention that with her larger practice. So what is a weekly recap meeting? And I'm going to go through the weekly recap meeting in great detail now and explain to you, for those of you that have not facilitated one on your own or are already participating in a weekly recap meeting, we're going to recap what should be covered. It is a weekly team review of multiple aspects of your practice, covering 3 main areas: the calendar, outcomes from the recent client meetings, typically from the previous week, and past due tasks. A KMG team member may be leading your meeting. Some of you are leading this meeting on your own or facilitating the meeting on your own, so this is a good recap for you. Are you really covering all of these topics that we recommend you cover? Maybe not in the weekly recap meeting, but you are covering them outside of the weekly recap meeting in some fashion. As Kristen was able to share with us, they are covering those tracking tools prior to the weekly recap meeting. So the most important thing here is just to make sure that you do cover all 3 of these areas, whether it's in a weekly recap meeting or in a separate meeting. These topics are important from preventing those client promises from slipping through the cracks. So in detail, we do have an agenda for you to use, and we'll be sending you that resource after this presentation, along with a checklist. The 3 parts that include the calendar. So this is going to be your number of client meetings and calendar conflicts. Your CMOT, the client meeting outcome tracker. That's going to be your meeting follow-up checklist. Prompt discussion of outcomes and actions resulting from the client meeting. So we're triggering that advisor's memory to what happened in the client meeting. And then the dashboard on Connect. And those tasks are going to be filtered by the follow-up date. We do recommend this flow as you go through the process. So the calendar. Let's talk about specifics of the calendar. And Kristen mentioned a couple of these already. What you should be looking for when reviewing the calendar is the number of client meetings. Preferably 4 to 6 weeks in advance. You want to have the goal on number of client meetings and compare to that advisor's model week of how many client meetings should be scheduled, so that you're able to prep in advance. That not only are you proactive in scheduling, you're proactive in prepping for those client meetings and not prepping for them last minute, the day before, a couple of days before. Review the calendar for conflicts and make necessary reschedules specifically for this weekly recap meeting, as well as any other client meetings. I did point out the weekly recap meeting because it is important to keep it consistently weekly, even if all members of your team can't attend. You're covering 1 week's worth of client meetings at a time. So if you have a practice with 20 client meetings like Kristen's, trying to catch up and do 40 client meetings in 1 week becomes very difficult and challenging. And then lastly, with the calendar, reviewing the upcoming advisors out of office dates to plan accordingly. Use this opportunity to determine if we are on track with the advisor's ideal number of client meetings, and look for the light or heavy weeks. And those are good to point out. With having the entire team as part of the weekly recap meeting, your scheduler will be there to attend, and so we can recommend, or the advisor can ask to reschedule meetings if necessary. With the CMOT, the Client Meeting Outcome Tracker, here's where we would recommend that you select a specific view of the CMOT. There are multiple views. So there is a screenshot to the right with the arrow. We recommend that you use the weekly recap view. And the reason for this is we'll automatically sort and filter for you in preparation for our best practice recommendation on how you would go through this. So Kristen already reviews the Ready for Weekly Recap meeting. There are the not started and follow-up needed statuses as well that come up to the top of the weekly recap view. And so we recommend that you at least start there, so that those ones that are not started, if they're old, we need to get to the bottom of why they haven't been started yet, so they don't just sit there for weeks. Kristen mentioned an example of not having the meeting notes yet, so it's a good reminder for us to ask the advisor where those meeting notes may be. Additional CMOT statuses are going to be the in process. So this is the CMOT process that has begun but has been interrupted for whatever reason, and this can be because you have multiple team members updating the CMOT, or it can be because you may have had to pick up a client call in the middle of processing the meeting notes. And then the closed status. If Key Management Group is facilitating this meeting for you, we recommend that you do not click on the closed status unless we do during the weekly recap meeting. If you're facilitating the meeting on your own, then we recommend that you do not click on this status until you have reviewed it with the team and the advisor has had a chance to buy off. We also put a screenshot here with a recommended outcome after you've reviewed the meeting notes, what you can expect to see on your CMOT. You're comparing the meeting outcomes against the trackers. So the first 4 columns there, you'll see BPT, FAT, return mail, and FPO. You're comparing those meeting notes and the outcomes to the tracking tools, making sure that you update the trackers accordingly. So reference trackers listed here have either updated or reviewed statuses. Just a note why you would choose one over the other. A good tip to think about when choosing whether you've updated or reviewed a specific tracker. Updated would be if you've added a new entry. And reviewed is going to be if there was already a line item there, you're reviewing to make sure that it's accurate. So I like to use the comparison. Updating your BPT is going to be for those new business items. And reviewing your future assets is typically going to mean that there's already been a future asset assigned maybe a year or 2 ago, and you're just reviewing it to make sure that the dollar amount of that future asset is accurate. Make sure that all of your Contact Manager checks have been completed. There are 3 checks to look at in Contact Manager. So in this screenshot, you can only see one of them, but they are the group service frequency, the alphanum, and the subtype. You're going to check for the next meeting date. That's that proactive scheduling. And ask if the advisor discussed any referrals. And if so, were there any prospects that came from that discussion? We'll want to make sure that it gets added to the prospect tracker. So the dashboard in detail. There is a dashboard designed for the weekly recap meeting. Again, we recommend this view because it already sorts and filters it for your discussion purposes. The dashboard is called the Weekly Recap Dashboard, and so you can see there we put a screenshot in of where you can find that dashboard. Reviewing the items and tasks with follow-up dates in the past. That is most important. Those are our priority items. They come up to the top of every tracking tool. So this dashboard sorts every tracking tool by follow-up date and puts those old ones up at the top. That's going to be your priority. If time does allow, we want to review the tasks coming due in the next week or two. I know that the dashboard actually goes out 30 days. So if you are that far ahead and time allows, you can be proactive in planning for the follow-up. Now I'm going to go through each specific tracking tool on the dashboard so you can get a sense of what you should be looking at with each tracking tool. I mentioned overall for all the tools you're looking at past or current, today's date, follow-up dates. But there are some other specifics that I want to mention with regards to each of the tools. So the first one is the business processing tracker. You want to review for completeness, follow-up date, and follow-up person. That's most important. Make sure there's a follow-up date and a follow-up person assigned to every line item. If a task has been confirmed as complete, since you're going to be in with the team discussing this, you can mark it closed. And address any items with past due follow-up dates, stating as necessary with details of next steps and relevant follow-up dates. So you can put that information in the details during this weekly recap meeting. The future assets is similar to the DPT, reviewing for completeness, follow-up date, and follow-up person. Address any items past due and those coming due within 2 weeks to determine if items need to be addressed prior to the upcoming meeting. So this is one where you would really want to look forward and not just past in preparation for the upcoming client meetings. Many of the practices I work with will assign those follow-up dates for next meeting dates, and so you have a way of proactively prepping for those outside assets. If applicable, have team members add necessary items to the upcoming case preparation materials. So if you've already begun those agendas, you could potentially add those future assets at that time. Bear with us for a moment. I can actually ask, I'm going to ask a question here while we're waiting for the slide to switch over. And this can be for any of the tracking tools. Does anyone else have a different way of sorting or focus during this review? So during the review of the tracking tools, if you would like to share with us, if you could just raise your hand, I'll go ahead and open up your phone line. There you go, Kristen.
So one thing that we found that's useful for our practice is that if we have a task that's going to be transactional in nature, we actually don't put a follow-up date on it to begin with because it allows it to float to the top. So we'll find that we use no follow-up dates on things that require money movement, or if I'm bringing in new assets, then once it's been reviewed, we'll put the date on it and then we'll, move forward from there. But just helps when you have a lot of tasks to let things float to the top.
Definitely, definitely. That's a great practice preference. And I believe group service frequency was next there, Peggy. So with the group service frequency, this one's a little lengthy, I know, so bear with me here. We recommend that at least after the 15th of the month, you are making sure the group service frequency has been pasted in for the month 6 weeks from now. So here we are, the middle of, or coming up here to the end of May. We would absolutely want to make sure that July was pasted in. So you heard me mention with the calendar review, 4 to 6 weeks is what we recommend for proactive scheduling. So you need to have this as your resource. If the advisor hasn't had a chance to review yet, you could take a moment. I don't recommend it if you have a lot of, if they're meeting with a lot of clients, so your list is going to be lengthy. But you can go through it during this weekly recap meeting and mark the ones that the advisor would not want you to call. For entries marked in progress, make sure there is a relevant follow-up date and follow-up person, just like with the other tools. For entries marked unable to schedule, this is absolutely the time to discuss those. The unable to schedule is perfect timing with it being the weekly recap meeting. The entire team is there to discuss this on next steps. So there are usually two options. The advisor is going to want you to either send a letter, a no response letter, or move the status to that next CSS so we can wait until they come back up again. Working our way down, the dashboard is going to be your managed accounts tracker. I'll review for completeness your target months and next meeting dates, as well as a follow-up person. This is a practice preference. I can say that 100% of the practices that we work with utilize both of these columns, but we highly recommend it. And you can review that then. It automatically filters it for you on how you should be discussing this tracking tool. So you're going to address any of the items with the target months in the past. You'll see those come right up to the top. And those with next meeting dates in the next 30 days. Again, proactive. If the client's already scheduled, you're going to be able to discuss whether or not you need to prep for that managed account review. The client may need to be scheduled for a meeting if they have a current or past target month and no next meeting date. So another note here, with your scheduler already in the room, you can ask him or her to do that, and then assign specific actions if necessary. With the phone, the system is going to be more simple, reviewing for follow-up date and follow-up person, and then just assigning the specific actions if necessary. Prospects. So we're going to review for completeness here. Again, follow-up date and follow-up person. I know I sound like a broken record, but those are really important. And then assigning the specific actions for the prospects. There is a specific next steps column that also comes up with the prospects. You can monitor that as part of this weekly recap meeting if you don't have a marketing meeting outside of the weekly recap meeting. The return mail, so this is going to be those client tasks, review for completeness, as well as follow-up date in person. Address any items past due or coming due within the next 2 weeks. Again, for case preparation purposes, if you have a client coming in the next couple of weeks, you may be able to address those outstanding items that the clients have not yet completed or turned into you. You can also include that in your confirmation process. So if you're reviewing in advance and looking proactively out into the future, you can remind the client to bring in those tax returns as part of that confirmation call. And then the next one starts more of the monthly type reviews. And I'm going to have Kristen go into this a little bit more. She started to explain to us about those monthly topics. The systematic payouts is one of them. This one we usually recommend that you review in the first weekly recap meeting of the month. The refresh of this tool should have already occurred the last week of the month, so it's ready and fresh for you to review. Review to determine the accounts in need of cash replenishment, and assign specific actions if necessary. Now I know this is not a tool that all practices use, but when to cover it, if you are, is great practice on a monthly basis. Be mindful that this tracking tool rounds up to the nearest tenth. We like to remind everyone of that. This means that it may reflect a 1 whole draw remaining when there is slightly less than that. So be mindful of that when you're reviewing. Even if you see a 1 draw remaining, we recommend you look into it and that you actually are looking at anything less than 2 draws. And that's what is automatically filtered in that dashboard view on the weekly recap meeting view. Another quick question for you with regards to that systematic payout tip. Has anyone experienced or gotten caught by this little quirk? If so, a show of hands. Kristen and Megan. Yep. And Kristen, I know I've been there when that's actually happened to your practice. So just a handful of you. Continuing on with the monthly reviews, the financial planning tracker. You heard Kristen mention this is something that they review on a monthly basis. This one we recommend last weekly recap meeting of the month. You're going to review that workflow tracking tool. So this is the home office financial planning tracker that is housed on Connect. There is a specific view called the workflow tracking. We're going to identify any client with delivery due dates in the next 90 days. That's going to be our proactive, somewhat proactive here. We recommend even further in advance if you're sticking to the target month column. So you're then going to review the target month column for the next 3 months. So without going into great detail here with regards to the financial planning tracker, this is your opportunity to discuss both workflow, so the data through the plan process, and then the delivery, having all the applicable team members part of that process in the weekly recap meeting. So it's usually important that the advisor be there, your planning specialist, and those included in getting that plan completed and ready for delivery. The SPS cash balances, again, you heard Kristen mention this one, reviewed during the second weekly recap meeting of the month. This one, you're going to review for low cash balances and high cash balances. We recommend below 0.16%, as well as greater than 20%. Those 20% are your high cash values, 100% cash. The R&D tracking tool, it does not show up on the dashboard, so this is something that you want to look at specifically towards the end or that final quarter. It's most important. Some practices are using this and some are not, but we do recommend it become part of the weekly recap meeting towards the last quarter. As I mentioned, we have a couple of resources for this weekly recap meeting, so you can prevent those client promises from slipping through the cracks. We have an agenda that looks very similar to this presentation today with the details, but we also have a checklist. So if you're facilitating this meeting on your own and would like a reminder as you go through the meeting, I've attached here a snapshot of this checklist, so it's a quick reference for the needs during this meeting. Before I went into detail on what should be covered in such a meeting, I mentioned that you may or may not include all of these parts in the weekly recap meeting. So if you're not finding enough time or energy or participation, or maybe even a lack of paying attention, you can include these topics outside of the weekly recap meeting. We just want you to make sure that you do cover all these topics. They are extremely important for the operation. So you can see that here. Let's go ahead with the first poll question. And not all of you may be able to answer this, and if you can't, I did choose an option for you for NA, not applicable, but I would like to know, for those of you beginning to facilitate this meeting on your own, are you actually sticking to the biweekly schedule? So with KMG facilitating biweekly and you facilitating biweekly. Yes, no, or sometimes. Again, it's for those of you facilitating this weekly recap meeting on your own. And about 3/4 of you have completed this, so we'll go ahead and close out the poll here. 67% of you said yes, and the remainder said NA. So that means that those of you that are facilitating on your own are in fact sticking to the biweekly schedule. Great job. And those of you that are not, means we're facilitating it for you 100%. So great. Now, please raise your hand if your team does not go through all of the trackers that I mentioned today. Don't be afraid. And go ahead and keep your hands up through this one. I'm just going to kind of go through the list here. So Carla Doss, we have two Carlas. Carla, would you mind sharing with us which ones you do not cover, and if you cover it at another time or in another fashion? I opened your phone line, Carla. You may have us on mute.
We don't open the, we don't go through the prospect tracker that much.
No prospects? Okay. Does the advisor go through those prospects on his own?
He's supposed to.
All right. Good note there. And Kaylin? Same team here.
Yes. Yeah.
Were you going to say the same thing?
Yes.
Prospect tracker, or were you thinking of another one?
No, it's really just a prospect tracker. I mean, we don't use the SPO or return mail,
Okay.
so we don't go through those.
So the ones that you're using, just not the prospect tracker. Are you finding that without going through the prospect tracker, they're not having as many prospects scheduled to meet with?
Yeah, I mean, it makes it, it's definitely less than it could be.
Got it. And I promise I'm not calling anybody out here, because I know after working with many practices on this that there are lots of you that don't cover everything in every weekly recap meeting. So I'd just like us to collaborate on how we can include some of these things that we may not be able to fit in based on time or capacity, how we can include those outside of the meeting, outside of the specific weekly recap meeting. So for this practice, the prospects are being kind of put on the back burner. How about Megan? So Megan, I just opened up your phone line. What types of things are you not able to get to in your weekly recap meeting?
So in our weekly recap meeting, we don't go through the cash balance report. We do that the beginning of the month. So like the first Monday, we have a staff meeting before our weekly recap meeting. So we don't cover that with Katie, but we cover that with the advisors as a team beforehand. And then the financial planning tracker, we don't review that either. Like you said, in the last WRM of the month, we actually just started with our new financial planning coordinator. We just started putting in task and business processing with follow-up dates relevant to the target delivery. So he checks that monthly, and then we review if there's any at risk or any that need to be addressed right away. So that's kind of an ongoing, everyday thing. And the group service frequency, when you mentioned it earlier, I actually have a meeting at the beginning someday. It's like recurring in the calendar for, I think it's the first Wednesday of every month, that I sit down with each advisor and go through the clients that I have questions on. Instead of going through that in the weekly recap meeting, we still look at the group service frequency, but only if like I've made read remarks for specific questions for the advisor.
Okay. I like the preference piece on the financial plan. That's a great way to get it into the weekly recap meeting without having to bring up the specific tool. So that's a great preference piece. Thank you for sharing that. Kristen, you had another to share with us.
For us,
Oh.
I was just going to say for us and our trackers, we kind of address them on a consistent basis. So we review them the way I said we look at things on a monthly basis, but like for the RMDs and the SPS low balance, we really do look at that regularly through the week too and discuss it to make sure that everyone's on the same page.
Right. Just a point for everyone, not that anyone mentions this, but if you find that you are regularly running out of time to make it through all the way through the agenda and checklist, it's a good practice to put those tracking tools that you didn't get to last week in the beginning. So for this week, you know, you can start. It's the way that the tracking tools are actually laid out is in alphabetical order. So you can begin anywhere. It doesn't always have to be with the business processing tracker. It's a good practice to get into the habit of. Kristen, did I just forget to put your hand down, or did you have another point to make?
I think you forgot to put my hand down.
Okay. Next to your question for the group, if you could please raise your hand if your team does not go through the SPS cash balance report. I heard some on the FP tracker already, and then the R&D as part of the weekly recap meeting. So I know in my previous question I didn't go into any specifics. I just asked if you didn't cover any tools. Just wanted to see if I asked it a different way. Megan, I see your hands raised here. I'm assuming that's the same as you've already mentioned to us, correct?
That's correct.
All right. How about, so I just have one, another question to ask the group here. Are there any other preference pieces that you could add and share with us as a group that have made this weekly recap meeting better in value, in time, in enjoyment? I know that this meeting isn't the most enjoyed team meeting. So is there anything that you could share with us on how we could make it better? If so, please raise your hand and I'll go ahead and open up your phone line. No tips and tricks from any of you? Or you're just too shy? All right then, I'll go ahead and wrap up. Before you go, we will be standing by for questions, so I have another 9 minutes here scheduled to meet with you. So please feel free to reach out to me via email or phone. I'd be happy to get back to you right away. We will follow up with a PDF on this topic as well as a survey. We encourage you to please fill out the survey so that we can make these collaborative learning series more valuable to you. And then don't forget that you are each other's best resources. So as we run around and introduce each other, I'd be happy to share contact information if you want me to. So I would never share your contact information if you did not want me to. I'll be sure to ask. But you're definitely each other's best resources as you are in the field with each other and preventing these client promises from slipping through the cracks. So please utilize each other if you need to, or any member of team management group can help specifically with the practice management department. Thank you everyone for participating. Have a good rest of your day.